when that fire break is not in use, and especially if you make it a wider than average fire break, plant it. And so, think about, having a clover food plot all the way around one of these bedding blocks, and then having it also paired with an advantageous wind direction so that you can easily hunt it based on the prevailing winds on the property that you hunt. And then you also know where, if you've got, these concentrated food sources on your property, where he's probably going to want to leave or where he's going to return from. And that is how you start very reliably patterning these deer and making them do what you want to and increasing the huntability of the property.
With the deer on this property that you guys were looking at, y'all were looking at the kinds of cover they selected for at certain times.
Yeah.
So with again, really just deer in general, but especially the bucks, during daylight hours, what were they selecting for, and why do you think it was?
Heavy cover.
Just visual obstruction, heavy cover?
Yeah. Just think about stuff you don't want to walk through, primarily. So all of those SMZs, those dense, really woody, creekside areas, those drains, and then the really young loblolly pine plantations tended to be where they were laid up. And you think about that, and you can easily recreate that intentionally on a property, particularly if you think about, anytime you're going to have a timber harvest, whether it be a thinning or even a clear cut, or even after you've already clear cut and you go to replant, it's nothing to take out a few acres in a block and either burn it less to allow it to establish denser cover, or you can just not even replant it and let that area grow up. But you can strategically create what Craig Harper refers to as bedding blocks across the property. That's the name that he uses for them. That's the one I've kind of adopted and started to use as well. But they only have to be a few acres. And the really cool thing about it is, especially here in the South, you're probably still going to want to have some disturbance in those areas just so that they don't, if you leave them long enough, they're just going to turn into a forest again, and you're going to lose that cover near ground level that they really like. So you're probably going to want to put some kind of fire break around it. Well, you're only burning those areas once every maybe 5 or so years because you want to let it get really woolly and thick, right? So when that fire break is not in use, and especially if you make it a wider than average fire break, plant it. And so, think about, having a clover food plot all the way around one of these bedding blocks, and then having it also paired with an advantageous wind direction so that you can easily hunt it based on the prevailing winds on the property that you hunt. And then you also know where, if you've got, these concentrated food sources on your property, where he's probably going to want to leave or where he's going to return from. And that is how you start very reliably patterning these deer and making them do what you want to and increasing the huntability of the property. And so then the trick becomes, how do you move in and out of that? That's the other key component, right? How do you get in and out of those spots to hunt him without him ever knowing you were there? And then once you've got all that in alignment, then it becomes kind of a waiting game and being strategic about when you want to go in there and make it happen.
We need to go buy some property right now. That is exactly. Second, you were talking about that fire break. I was like, oh, you need to plant that. That would be an awesome ambush point right next to the bedding area.
Yeah.
And again, you can hunt it from different sides. You have good access.
One of the best things about my new club is they keep a log book. You got to sign in when you come into the property, and it's broken up into sections. And then there's 40 different sections or something like that. So you'd sign in, and it'd be Andrew Maxwell, the date, 4. Mm-hmm. I'm hunting section 4. So I'm going to go take a bunch of pictures of that thing and make myself a little heat map where everybody's hunting.
Yeah.
And kind of go from there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the time, I just developed this back when I was bow hunting a whole lot during graduate school. And I was, this was a time where I was looking at these GPS tracks and I had all this stuff fresh in my mind. I hunted a particular property. I think it was 850 acres. About 300 acres of that was working cattle farm, and the rest of it was forested. And this was a place that had a long history of deer hunting and of killing really good deer. And there were, people that had been hunting that property for 2-3 decades that had lots of experience with how the deer moved on there, what the best stands were, where to go, when to go there, all that kind of thing. And I was a relative newcomer compared to all those folks. And I started just going, and I don't know why I did this. Maybe it was like subconscious or something else. But it's to the point that like my friends and family will make jokes about it still sometimes, that I'll just go off in these random wild ass places on the property that people will tell me all the time, you're never going to see anything there. You're never going to kill anything there. And I come back with blood on my arrows. I mean, I've done that many, many times. And it's to the point, like I was saying, that they make jokes about it. But my wife in particular, anytime, like I'll go to a new place and I'll take like a climber in there or something like that, or whatever, just something easy to set up. And I'll text her and I'll say, oh man, this is like the worst place possible. I have no idea why I even came in there. And she'll oftentimes text me back and be like, yeah, you're about to kill a deer, aren't you? Because it seems like every time I go to one of these wild hair places, I don't think it's so much that, I mean, I'm sure that I have developed an eye over the years, just like any deer hunter would. You get a feel for a spot, right? You walk in, you're scouting, you've deer hunted enough, you get a feel for a spot, whether you're going to see deer there and whether or not it's going to be productive. But I think a big part of my success in doing that is just the deer never expected us to be there. And we see this, and this wasn't a direct part of that South Carolina study that I went through, but there have been other studies where they have specifically, tracked hunters and documented the places that they're using, the intensity of the use, or they've GPS tracked the hunters themselves, and they see deer avoidance of those areas. That's been well documented. So they pattern us just as much as we pattern them. And I feel like being unpredictable can help increase your odds of success.
That was going to be one of the next things I asked about with this study that you guys did, like how the deer patterned the hunters or how the hunting pressure affected it. Like just for, again, through your eyes, both a researcher and a hunter, what did that look like to you? I mean, what kind of interesting things were you able to tease out of that data?
Of what specifically now?
Like,
can you reframe that?
Like with the hunting pressure along with the deer movements. Like, so y'all were GPS tracking these deer.
Yeah.
Was it really easy to see, like, oh, that big food plot right there, that buck like never goes out into that food plot or something?
So I have never really broken down those tracks and looked at specific individuals in that level of detail, because a lot of times what we're trying to do with these studies is speak to the averages. So like, what are the trends that we can see that have something in common among all deer? You could do that, and I mean, there's some animals I would guess that are more predictable than others. Like I said, I haven't dug into it a lot, but I mean, there are certain individuals that seem to just kind of bounce around their personalities, right? And there's some animals that are more predictable, and I think that's just another personality. There was some work 20, 30 years ago, I can't remember the exact date, that was done out of South Texas to, circle back to us talking about King Ranch stuff earlier. I think it may have even been done there. But the researchers in that particular study, I can try to look it up and send it to you guys, or it may have been a book chapter, basically broke buck personalities down into, I think it was like 4 or 5 different characteristics of how they behaved and how they noticed, these trends in their GPS tracks, where you had some of these bucks that were just seemed to be all over the place all the time. And then you had these other bucks that were just real homebodies. And it is somewhat correlated with age, but even within the same age class, you can have those different personalities.